Been seeing and hearing President Trump's flagship tax and spending bill is heading for a final vote in the House of Representatives after hours of overnight negotiations to win around dissenting Republicans. Well, let's speak live on the programme to Joe Walsh, former congressman and was Republican presidential candidate back in 2020. He's also the host of the Social Contract podcast. Joe, welcome to the programme. In terms of the vote, when we get it, either way, this bill is likely to be the defining moment, isn't it, or define this second term?
Look, it's clear, and I'm no fan of Donald Trump, but it's clear that Donald Trump is very powerful right now, and he quite literally owns the Republican Party. So it's not a surprise that all the Republicans have fallen in line to pass what you rightly called kind of the seminal piece of legislation in this second term. When you look at what this bill does, and I think it's a bad bill, it increases, tax breaks for the wealthy. It devastates poor and working class Americans when it comes to their health care and food assistance. It will lead to incredible harassment of immigrants in this country. And most importantly, it'll add trillions and trillions to our national debt. That's all on Trump's and Republicans' lap now because the bill will pass.
Why then have Republicans voted for it? Because you talk about Medicaid, for example. All the stats show that many thousands of people, millions of people who are in those Republican states will be directly impacted. So why have those lawmakers voted or are likely to vote the way they're going to?
Fear, utter abject fear and cowardice. They do not want to lose their seat in the House or lose their seat in the Senate. And for a Republican to stand against Donald Trump right now in 2025 means you will lose your seat in Congress. I was a congressman. It's a nice gig. So it's utter fear in Congress. I can tell you that Republicans privately, they know this is a bad bill. They completely know this is a bad bill. But Donald Trump is their cult leader, and they cannot oppose him because they want to keep their job.
We were just showing pictures a moment ago of J.D. Vance. Of course, he was the deciding vote in the Senate. But, of course, over the last 48 hours, we've had that separate news that arms shipments that were passed by Congress had been blocked by the Department of Defense going to Ukraine. Now, one of the things that was being urged of the holdouts in the House was to stick to demanding more weapons and money for Ukraine. But as you're watching this, do you think even that has fallen away?
Absolutely, because Donald Trump works for Putin. I mean, again, I've been, and I'm not the only one, I've been screaming this to the world ever since Trump was sworn in. Donald Trump is on Putin's side, which is what explains everything he does and has done in that war to help Russia and hurt Ukraine. And again, privately, Republicans know this, but they're cowards and they don't want to speak out against it.
I'll come back to that because there are developments on that story in a moment. But going back to the bill, because just give me an idea of the sort of pressure on those holdouts and the political long-term implications for Republicans, because we have midterms coming up. You have Elon Musk, who, of course, has fallen out with Donald Trump, vehemently against the way this hikes up the national debt, and now threatening to form a third party to work against all of those Republicans who vote alongside Donald Trump on this. So what do you think the fallout is likely to be for Republicans over the next couple of years?
I think it's going to hurt Republicans big time in 2026. It reminds me of Obamacare back in 2009. When Democrats passed Obamacare in 2009, they knew that doing that would devastate them in the 2010 midterms, and it did. Now, the difference then was Democrats they still believed Obamacare was a good bill, but they knew it would hurt them. What's going on now is Republicans know this bill is going to hurt them politically next year. But privately, they all know it's a bad bill, too. That's what makes this so doubly frustrating. They know it's a bad bill. They know it's going to hurt the very people who voted for Trump.
A final thought coming back to Trump-Putin, because we're told that they are going to have a conversation, and they may well be having it now, looking at the timeline that Donald Trump has been talking about. At a number of occasions, Donald Trump has given Vladimir Putin 2 weeks and 2 weeks and 2 weeks before taking action. Do you think anything is likely to come out of a phone call like this, apart from more muddying of the waters, as the number of Republicans, perhaps on Capitol Hill, edging ever closer to wanting a new round of sanctions?
Life can be complicated in a lot of areas. It's not complicated here. What will come out of this latest phone call, if there's a phone call between Putin and Trump, is whatever Putin wants, that's eventually what Trump is going to do. This is not complicated, and it's never been complicated. It pains me as an American to say this, but the president of the United States is not on the side of Ukraine and the free world. He's on Russia's side. So it's not about peace. It's not about ending the war. It's about surrendering, Ukraine surrendering to Putin. That's ultimately what Trump wants.
Well, of course, the White House always deny that. He keeps saying it is to edge towards peace. I hear what you're saying, though, Joe, and we wait to hear details from that telephone call. Joe Walsh, it's always great talking to you. It's always great having you on the programme. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, let's analyse a little more about that bill, because what will Donald Trump's contentious tax and spending legislation, called by him the One Big Beautiful Bill, what will it actually do to the US government's national borrowing and debt levels? Well, Ben Chu from BBC Verify has been taking a look.
This is what Donald Trump pledged in August last year when he was campaigning to be re-elected to a second presidential term. Our country will be powered by growth. We will pay off all of our debt. But the new tax and spending legislation the President and the Republican Party are trying to push through Congress would likely, on the contrary, massively increase the US national debt. Now, there are spending cuts in Trump's so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act, mainly hitting health insurance programs for poorer Americans. But these are swamped by the tax cuts, which mainly benefit wealthier Americans. The latest estimates from the independent US Congressional Budget Office suggest its net effect would be to raise US government deficits or annual borrowing by a cumulative $3.4 trillion over the 10 years to 2034, relative to where borrowing would otherwise have been. So let's put these surging borrowing figures into some context. The US's national debt, bonds or government-issued IOUs, which are held by private investors, were equivalent to around 40% of the size of the American economy just before the 2008 financial crisis. But by last year, it had risen to 96%, pushed up over 16 years by considerable borrowing during the financial crisis, the tax cuts in Trump's first term, and by spending and measures to support the economy during the COVID pandemic and its aftermath. Now, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget think tank estimates the debt was already set to rise to 117% of US GDP by 2034. This was because of upward pressures on spending and the unwillingness of Congress to raise taxes. But the think tank now estimates that under the latest version of the bill, the debt could grow even further, hitting 127% of US national income by 2034. Now, the US has historically had a lot of capacity to borrow from the rest of the world because of the strong demand from savers in other countries for US debt, which has long been regarded as the ultimate safe investment asset, and also due to the central role played by the dollar in the global financial system. Nevertheless, many economists still regard the US national debt trajectory as simply unsustainable in the long term. And if the US government runs into a fiscal crisis with spiking interest rates, that's something that would have a profoundly destabilizing impact on the rest of the world economy too.